Hello, everybody. Want to get started today and keep everything on time. Thank you for joining us today for our lunch presentation on board oversight and not-for-profits. So a couple questions here. What is the size and culture of your board? Is your board an advisory group or a rubber stamp? When is the last time you updated your board job descriptions, reviewed expectations, and updated your fundraising expectations? We'll go through some of that today in our presentation and hopefully give you some things to take back to your board and implement. I'm Carolyn Powell. I'm the Development Director here at Tronconi Seguer & Associates. I will be your host today and also doing some of our housekeeping to get us started. There's a couple different ways you can interact with us. There's a toolbar on the side that has a copy of the presentation and also an overview of our expert today. And there's also a question box. Feel free to put any questions in there, that aha moment that you got today, what you're struggling with, what you're hoping to hear about, if you'd like to set up a meeting with Anthony after or later this week or next week. Also, too, you'll receive a survey after the webinar today. If you could please fill that out for us, it is helpful. Let us know if the presentation was helpful, if you have any feedback, if you have any additional questions, you can do that there. And then this afternoon, I will send out an email with a link to the recorded session. So if you want to go back and listen to anything, and again, another copy of the slides. So that'll come out this afternoon. So without further ado, let's get started. Again, Tronconi Seguer & Associates, we're a certified public accounting firm and business consulting. Anthony Pizzino is a CPA and principal here at the firm and has over 17 years of public accounting experience. Broad range of industries that he works in, from nonprofits, government agencies, foundations, higher education, food service, and real estate. He has specialties in financial statement audits and reviews, internal controls, and quality controls and professional standards. So before I turn it over to him today, I am going to do two quick little polls to kind of just see where you are. So the first one is, how big is your board? If you can just fill that out for us real quick. As people are coming in, it looks like the majority are between that 6 and 10 people. We have some a little bit bigger than that. Interesting. And I'm going to keep things moving, I'm going to close out the poll in 3, 2, 1. I'll just kind of share the results real quick with you. So again, about half are in that 6 to 10, and then the other half go all the way up to a 20. So thank you for that. And then I have one more quick question for the group here. How does your board have fundraising expectations? If you could let us know. Wow, we're totally split on these as they're coming in. Great, and again, to keep things moving, I'm going to close this out in 3, 2, 1. And again, I'll just share real quick so everybody knows who's on here. And it's the four-way tie here of what we're doing. So I'm going to hand it over to Anthony and get us started today and give you some great information.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's session, board oversight and not-for-profits. I'm happy to be here. During today's session, I hope to provide a good balance of perspective on a variety of topics within board governance, specialized in not-for-profit boards. As Carolyn mentioned, my board governance and not-for-profit experience comes from a little over 17 years of experience in public accounting, particularly in auditing and consulting in the non-for-profit arena. Served on a variety of boards and committees, both big and small, in various capacities. So I'm hoping I could provide some good information to this group, and I do encourage questions throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to type it in, and I'll keep a lookout for that to answer any questions as the webinar goes on. And one thing to keep in mind, there's no one size fits all for board governments. It depends a lot on the organization, whether it's the size, budget constraints, complexity, the life cycle of your board, different stage that your board's in. So again, as we go through a lot of this information, you have to keep in mind that it could be applicable to your board. It might not be applicable based on these different factors. So we're going to go over some practical tips of how to improve your board governance throughout this proposal. So our topics today are board responsibility and fiduciary duties, policy and procedures. We're going to talk about some key procedures. For example, conflict of interest, which is a big one. Also whistleblower policies, related party transactions, credit cards, travel and expenses. So we're going to try to touch on a lot of these policies and procedures. And hopefully your board or the organization you're with has some of these policies in place. We're going to talk a little bit about board committees within the board. We all know, especially if you're on a large board like some of the attendees that has 16 to 20 members, committees are very important. We all know that one single board can't do all the work, especially meeting sporadically throughout the year. So we're going to talk about the importance of board committees. Maximizing value during board meetings, how to increase board engagement. So we'll give some tips and some knowledge on some do's and don'ts during the board meetings to help facilitate the meeting and get the most efficient meeting out there. Rebuilding your current board. Maybe your board isn't as effective or the size that you would like it to be. So we're going to talk about some tactics and some items to how to rebuild your board and try to attract new board members. Talk a little bit about crisis management, how to prepare and handle certain situations. This is a hot topic these days. There's a lot of crisis management situations that you might not think are, but we'll talk about, give some examples of some things your board can be doing, to help mitigate or look at these type of items. And lastly, we'll talk about fundraising responsibilities. Responsibility of board members. Is your board actively pursuing, fundraising activities? Are you being held accountable for fundraising? Do you have, a list of items? Are you motivated? So these are all things that we're going to talk about during today's session. So let's dig in. So we're going to start with a question. Why does board engagement matter? And, my simple answer is it's critical in moving forward a organization in the fulfillment of its mission. So nonprofit organizations are based on a mission. So most boards are with the nonprofit organization. There's a big difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit board. So for-profit obviously is profit motivated. Nonprofit is based on a mission that the organization and the board and management is trying to achieve. So Engaged Board is a forward-thinking board that strives for a collaborative partnership with the CEO, executive director. So important topic there is forward thinking. Good boards spend time on future issues. CEO and the executive director must work together in a collaborative effort. So it sounds pretty simple. So, but it's not always the case. So again, we want to try to emphasize forward thinking, trying to anticipate the next steps during your board meetings, during the development of your organization, and working collaboratively is also very important. Whether it's in the board, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's at home. So again, these are two items we want to talk about and emphasize. Engaged boards work between board meetings and attend meetings well prepared. What do you want to see out of board members in your organization? You want them to be there, of course. You want them to come prepared. You want to prepare for the meetings, whether it's reviewing last month's meeting, whether it's going on the portal and reviewing documents in preparation for the current meeting. You want your board members to come with good ideas. You want them to come with strategies and solutions and act, again, collaboratively throughout each board meeting and throughout the year. Board members are willing to deliberately, candidly, confidently treading on sensitive topics that may result in tough or messy discussions. They trust one another and they're comfortable with the culture of the organization, and they're confident that everyone values mutual respect. So again, a good board member will be comfortable with engaging. They listen. So you want somebody who's going to listen and provide, good feedback. We always don't want somebody to constantly be giving what they think. A big tool of being on a board or a management team is listening to, what the organization is doing, what management's doing, what the customer is doing, or what they desire. Respect other positions. Not everybody's going to agree. So you have to respect other position and, comfortable with, tough discussions, right? So you're like I mentioned before, you're not always going to agree, but you're going to have to be comfortable and you have to trust each other. So these are some good key characteristics of a board of directors. And if I were to put together a board and they use some simple words, I would use words such as strategic or committed, supportive, dynamic, passionate. These are the type of characteristics that I would like to see in a board, whether I'm on the board, whether I'm working, consulting with an organization or conducting an audit of an organization. These are the type of feedback I would like to receive from the board members and also from management of the organization. Board responsibilities. Being on a board is not just showing up for the meetings. There's a lot of different factors that go into being on a board and being a successful board member, and also helping that organization. In this slide, you could see 5 items that I find are extremely helpful when trying to figure out your responsibility, your role within the organization. Again, you're not always going to be an expert in certain items. You might be a program person, you might be a finance person, you might be a parent of somebody who's being serviced by the organization. So there's a lot of different roles that a board member could play, but these are the basic responsibilities that each board member is required or should have during their process as a board member. Lead strategically. There should be a strategic plan within your organization. You should develop and communicate the organization's directions, goals, and how to get there. By doing that, you want to build a complete board. You want to build a competent board. So you want people on the board that are willing to, have this strategic outlook. You want the strategic plan should also articulate the organization's mission and their role in the society and future direction. Number 2, ensure fiscal stability. What that means is you want to understand the business model and all financial aspects of the organization. The organization you might be serving on could be a community action organization. It could be a healthcare organization. It could be a foundation. So your duty is to understand what that organization does, their business model, and try to educate yourself on the fiscal stability, the fiscal organization of that organization that you're on. That is your duty. You want to ensure that there's adequate infrastructure to create and receive timely financial statements. So it's so important that the board is furnished with up-to-date financial statements, whether the boards meet on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis. The management should provide the most up-to-date financial information, whether that's going to be a statement of financial position, a statement of activities, cash flow analysis. These are all important factors in running an organization. And there's certain things that you could, being on a board, if you're not too in tune with what they do, or maybe you don't have a financial background, there's a lot of information that you can request from management or other board members to help you, learn more. So one being, you can always ask for the financial statements. You can read through those. The tax return, the 990. This is also a very important tool in taking a look of the financial stability of your organization. Budgets. There should always be a budget in place, and that budget should be update it, throughout the year based on performance of the organization. Significant transactions, who's approving certain items, who's approving the CEO's or the CFO's personal transactions or expenses. So these are all things that being on a board you can educate yourself. And if you're not, like as I mentioned, if you're not have a background in finance, you could talk to somebody who does, and they can help explain certain things to you. So again, I see a question up there.
Yeah, one just came in. If you want to just take a minute and answer it. You mentioned board portals. Do you have any suggestion on best products available and affordable price?
Yes. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but there is a variety of different products out there. One being Diligent, that's a really good product that I see in one of the organizations that I work with. There's also Boardable and Direct Point. Those are all very good from feedback that I've been receiving from clients. They do offer demos. So again, based on the size of your board, or what you're actually looking for, they could, customize that board report to do a lot of different things. Board portals are great, whether it's for pre-meeting activities, whether you're, dispersing the agenda, dispersing board papers. During the meeting, you could track and record decisions, assign tasks, recording digital signatures, and obviously post-meeting, you can always recap. You might have missed something during the meeting, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. But there are a variety of different products out there. Diligent and Boardable are two that I had direct experience with. And again, they do offer demos, and you can get pricing, dealing with the specific vendor. But I do encourage any organization using a board portal. It really keeps everything organized. It really keeps everything efficient during the board meetings. As long as the board members are on there actively, really a proponent for board portals.
Great, thank you. Hopefully we answered that for you, Shay. If not, throw another question in there.
Great, thanks. Back to the board responsibilities. Be an ambassador of your organization. Cultivate relationships that benefit the board. You want to build community relationships within your community with certain donors. And we're going to talk about fundraising a little bit later, but obviously nonprofit organizations rely a lot on donations, whether it's from community organizations, other businesses within the community. So again, you want to get the organization's name out there. You want to build a brand for yourself and also for their organization. So you also want to share the organization's impact on the community. You want the community to support your organization. So being out there, having events, whether it's a walk or a meat raffle or a 5K event or a dinner, these are all things to really get the organization's name out there, and also to network and meet people that possibly can help the organization, whether it's through volunteering, whether it's through partnerships with other organizations, or possibly getting donations or contributions from these people or organizations. So you want to be ambassador. You want to, be proud of your organization and let people know that. Number 4, you want to support and supervise the CEO or executive director. This is big. When you're, CEO and the executive director, they sometimes have a love-hate relationship with the board. So having both parties on the same page is very important. So how do you do that? The board should always recruit and hire that CEO. Series of interviews if that organization is open. If that position is open, you're going to want to, the board's going to want to play a part in the recruiting and hiring if that is an option. You want to supervise and evaluate the performance of your ED or your CEO. Hold them accountable. You want to know what they're doing, what their goals are for that particular year or quarter or long term. So that's one thing that you're going to want to evaluate them and make sure that they're doing what they're saying they're doing, and also how they're perceived within the organization and the community. You should have an emergency and long-term succession plan. For example, I have one client now where the executive director, and he's also the founder of the organization, is getting up there in age. He's, in his early 70s, and they're working on a succession plan for somebody to take over his role as the CEO. And it's harder than they think. They're, currently, interviewing, people to fit this position. And obviously for somebody who dedicated his life to the organization, it's very important that they try to keep the organization going and in the way that it was intended to, why it was intended to be formed. Discuss with your CEO and your executive director to see how they want to be supportive. I think it's important to have that conversation. Different management needs different support. So again, that's a good conversation to have with management and also with your executive director on how they want to be supportive. So you're going to want to work together with your CEO or executive director. Number 5, you want to ensure healthy governance. You want to make sure you want to review and understand the organization. You want to look at the bylaws. You want to recruit and train new members of the board. You want to create structures that align with getting the work done. That would be in a form of committees. So again, we talked about it with larger boards. Committees are so important, whether it's going to be an executive committee or a fundraising committee or a cybersecurity committee. It's very important to have these committees to help the board in between board meetings where they can meet on off weeks or off months. So again, committees are definitely an important part of a board, especially the larger the board gets. And then boards should conduct self-evaluations on themselves. Take a look in the mirror per se, and how have I been serving the board? Am I doing everything I can to help this organization? Am I helping with fundraising? Am I helping with volunteering? Am I helping, doing the duties that the organization needs me to do to help it be successful in the future? Oh, we have a question. Okay, great. How can a new board member get familiar with an organization's financial situation?
Good question.
Yep, that's a great question. And again, as I mentioned before, trying to review those financial reports is always a good starting point. Reviewing the 990 report, reviewing the financial statements, going over budgets that are prepared, also budget to actual information. These are all important tools to kind of get you up to speed on where the organization's at. There's also key financial indicators that you can run on financial statements, whether it's current ratio or days in cash on hand. These are all items that are good financial indicators of where organization is and where it's going. So if you run some type of indicators, if you look at the financial statements, if you have questions, these are questions that you'll bring to management. Also, reviewing an organization's functional expenses is quite valuable. So in each nonprofit financial statements, there's a statement of functional expenses which breaks out how much of the organization's funds are being used for program services and how much is being for management and general services such as salaries and admin expenses. And you want to see a good ratio, whether it's 85% program, 15% management and general. These are all indicators of how the organization's operating, how they're spending their funds, and how they're really giving back to the community in accordance with their mission. So that was a good question. Thank you. Fiduciary duties. Anybody on a board knows that they have a fiduciary duty to serve the organization. We're not going to spend too much time on this slide. I'll briefly go through these duties, but I think they're important for everybody to kind of remind themselves of, what's your role on the board, what are your duties, and I laid out 6 duties here. And duty of care, you want to actively participate in the board meetings. You want to be an active board member. You want to gather the best information possible to make informed decisions on the organization. You don't want to have a rubber stamp approach. You don't want to vote with the group. You want to be able to be educated, make the best decisions for the organization, and be a board member that's active. Duty of loyalty. This concept is members will put their best interests of the organization before their own. Good boards have strong practices around conflict of interest policies. We're going to spend a little time talking about conflict of interest um, in a couple of slides ahead. But again, you have to be loyal to the board. You can't take advantage of the board for personal gain. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit when we discuss conflict of interest. Duty of obediency, duty to obey the law. You want to make sure the organization's filing their payroll taxes timely. You want to make sure the organization is filing their federal and state tax filings accurately and timely. If organization has to have licensing within those states, within certain states, you want to make sure that they're in, regulatory compliance with anything that has to do with licensing. And you always want to protect the nonprofit's tax exempt status. Duty of confidentiality. You can't disclose confidential information about an organization or other individuals in the organization. Duty of prudence. You want to be aware of the risks and cautions in decision making, and duty to disclose. Board members to be forthright in their speech and behavior. If they have information that would influence the decision or impact the decision of other board members, they have the duty to make that information known. So, I always like to throw those duties into a slide and kind of remind everybody that being on a board it's a privilege and it's an important thing, and you have to follow these duties, as part of your service. I want to spend a little time talking about some policies and procedures and goals in key areas. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide, we laid out about a half dozen goals that you want your organization to achieve, whether it's protecting the resources, facilitating the maintenance of accurate records and the financial activities. Consistency is very important. Provide resources for training and staff, and assisting with compliance with government legal and reporting requirements. Some of the key areas and policies that are so important to our organization are listed on the right. Again, we're not going to talk about all these, but I do want to hone in on a couple. First, I want to talk about the whistleblower policy. Sure, everybody heard this term, and about 20 years ago when the Sarbanes-Oxley Act came out, it didn't apply to nonprofits so much, but a lot of the nonprofits started to adapt and started adopting these types of policies and procedures, and I think it's been really helpful just in the financial world and the nonprofit world. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but whistleblower policy is the #1 way fraud is detected in an organization. So it's very important to have a policy. Even on some states are even requiring nonprofits to have this organization. And on your federal form 990, it is a question where a box you have to check, do you have a whistleblower policy? So it is highly recommended and in some cases required by state law to have this policy. And I know everybody knows what a whistleblower policy is, and it helps protect individuals from retaliation from somebody who brings up an issue or topic. So having a policy and actually implementing that policy is a big difference. So how can a board help with the whistleblower policy? It can be structured in a lot of different ways, but I suggest that there is a board member, to head up the whistleblower policy, to be a recipient of any, receipts of any complaints. You could also set up a hotline. There's also a special email box. You want to establish, for the most part, a gatekeeper of these type of complaints, whether it's going to be, could be a board member, it could be the HR department. I would recommend a board member, but you don't want for example, your CFO to be the recipient, or the CEO to be the recipient of any whistleblower items. You don't want the receptionist to be. For example, if somebody, says something or has a complaint and they call the CFO and say, hey, I think, something's going on here. If the CFO is involved, they're going to be able to, avoid that complaint and mitigate so they could keep doing what they're doing. So you want to have a, line of control, most part a gatekeeper to kind of take any of those complaints and be able to facilitate to the board. So setting up that whistleblower policy is important. It should be a written document, should be included in your policies and procedures. It should be shared with the entire organization, management, employees, and obviously the board has a part, major role on implementing that. So one item that is very important. Travel and entertainment, this is always a hot topic. What could go wrong with travel and entertainment expenses? So much. It could be a Pandora's box of things that the organization or people are using credit cards or lack of receipts within an organization. So you want tight controls on travel and entertainment expenses. Number one issue we see with this is lack of receipts or lack of itemized receipts. There's a lot of personal credit cards out there that management has, or CEO has, or whether it could be drivers or anybody who has a credit card. This is one thing. You got to make sure that the organization or the employee collects receipts and they're itemized. You want to make sure that the costs are for the organization and what they're doing. You don't want to see personal expenses there. Or inappropriate expenses. You don't need a hotel suite. You could have a standard room. You don't need first class flights on an airplane. You could, sit in coach. When you're part of a nonprofit, all of this information, all of this is very important. And also the board should be approving, it's the best practice, the CEO or the executive director's expenses. So again, any expense report or credit card statement of the executive director or the CEO should be approved by the board. They should go through it, and if there's any questions or any items, that will mitigate any issues in the future. Now we're going to stay with that for a little while.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. I talked about corporate credit cards. Again, one rule of thumb: too many cards weakens control. So you want to try to limit the amount of credit cards the organization has. And the most common abuse of credit cards is, through gas. Gift cards is one that we've been seeing quite a lot of. And now there's a lot of, third-party pay sources like Venmo or Cash App or PayPal, where, some employees try to, hide funds, throughout those type of third-party sources. So again, you want to keep your credit cards to a minimum. You want to reconcile. You want to make sure that the credit card statements are reconciled and a timely with all receipts. And obviously, personal charges should never be allowed. And you always see, oops, I pulled out the wrong card. Sorry about that. And so you do see that. And sometimes it does happen, but sometimes that maybe it was intentional. It looks like we have another question.
Yeah, it looks like Mark, is director and officers insurance in place a must to join a nonprofit board?
Yes, the organization should always have that D&O insurance policy, and that should be reviewed, on an annual basis, typically with your other insurance policies. It definitely, we could talk about this, I said in the next slide when we talk about conflict of interest. So in short, yes, you should always have D&O insurance, and it should be, particular to the size of your board, the size of the organization, and and reviewed, annually or semi-annually with the organization. Typically, insurance runs a little bit on, I've been seeing, $700-800 for the year. I do see that quite a bit. So it is affordable, and it's something that, definitely should be maintained. Looks like we have another question.
Yeah, Shay has another question. Let me just click on it here. Are there any one-stop shop insurance companies to consider all things at once? Directors and officers insurance, cybersecurity, etc.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up cybersecurity insurance. That's something that we've been seeing a lot of, and organizations really want to safeguard their information these days. But there are a lot of the larger insurance companies, Lolly, one that comes to mind right away. They provide a nice package for nonprofit organizations where they could cover basically anything you're looking for, whether it's property insurance. Can you please spell Lawley, Lawwel? So they're a good place to start. Some of the other large organizations do have it, but I would suggest Lawley to get started if you're looking to change insurance, get new insurance, and I think it could be, as you mentioned, a one-stop shop. Great. Okay, conflict of interest. I know we're kind of running a little bit behind here, the tendency to talk a lot when I get into this stuff. But conflict of interest statement, this is, very important. And with conflict of interest, everybody has a misconception that it's a bad thing. It's, unlawful or there's a major issue, but that's not the case. For example, we live in Buffalo, New York. There's it's not the biggest city. We usually know different people that provide different services, whether it's a family member or a friend of somebody. It's not a bad thing, conflict of interest. It's only bad when the organization is being taken advantage of. So takeaways from this, what I want to say is you need to have a conflict of interest policy on staff or, in your policies and procedures. There's a basic rule of thumb that the IRS actually provides guidance on of how to, prepare and properly document your conflict of interest policy. So first, you have to adopt and follow a suitable policy. The policy should define what constitutes a conflict, whether it's IRS law or state law. You want to refer the conflict matter to the board or authorizing committee. You want to disclose any conflict of interest annually. So if you're on a board, you should be signing the annual conflict of interest statement. You should review the policy, and you should sign the conflict of interest statement based on whether you have a conflict or don't have a conflict. If you don't have a conflict, you check the box or whatever the form looks like saying no conflict, sign it. If you do have a conflict of interest, you should disclose that conflict, and then the board should take a look at that. If there is, and let's, we could give a example here. So for example, say the organization is doing a remodeling or renovation of a building. Maybe somebody on the boards, has a family member that owns a construction company. They get you a quote. It looks good. It looks fair. That's something where you're going to want to, that could be brought up as a conflict of interest. So what do you do in that case? You go out and get comparable bids. You go get comparable data, and then you make the decision. There's nothing wrong with picking that person or that organization as long as you do the due diligence and you record it properly within the board minutes. And if any type of vote on that particular member of the board should be recused from any voting. So again, takeaways from having a conflict of interest policy, you have to have one. You have to have a disclosure form. It should be reviewed annually and updated. You need to create that presumption on some of these items that I talked about. You need to refer conflict matter to the board and disclose any of the conflicts. And you want to create a culture of disclosure. So that is always best when dealing with the conflict of interest. Okay, we could go to the next one. Board committees, we touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation. So the larger the organization, the need for committees are much more. Most boards cannot do all the work and do it well during a normal board meeting. So a well-functioning committees to assist the board, can become very vital to an organization. Sometimes within a board meeting, there might be too much to go over. So again, divide and conquer, have these type of committees, throughout the year. Committees are created to provide counseling and advice for the board and to handle certain tasks on board's agendas with special expertise. So for example, if there is an audit and finance committee, you're going to want people with finance backgrounds, maybe a CPA, maybe a person from a finance organization or insurance person. If you have investments, say you have a lot of investments or a foundation, you're going to want somebody from the financial arena to help you manage those investments. Whistleblower, that would be something that would be good for a attorney to head up that type of committee. And you could have fundraising committees. There's all different committees that you could have based on the needs from your organization. Committees allow the organization to make decisions when the board is not in session. This is very helpful for large boards and boards that do not meet monthly. So again, committees are very important. Some board committees are authorized to take final actions without further board approval, such as the executive committee or audit committee. And on the next slide, we have some typical board committees that we see. Normally, we have executive board, audit, finance committee, board development, investments, compensation committees, and fundraising committees. Some are required by law. New York State requires a audit and finance committee to approve the audit and the tax filings and appointment of auditors. Some executive boards can act on behalf of the full board, and then some of the other boards, such as investments or compensation or fundraising, are optional or advisory boards. So having a committees based on your organization, based on the needs, would be very helpful in the board governance. Next topic is maximizing value during the board meetings. So again, sending out the agenda beforehand. I know we had a question earlier about board portals. Again, this is a very important to have organizations on the same page to use the time effectively for the meetings. So a lot of the board portals, for example, for pre-meetings, you could distribute the agendas for the meetings. You could, any type of paperwork or financial statements could be provided to the board members days ahead of time, even sometimes a week. So that board member could go over those those packets ahead of time in the meeting, so they're not scanning through trying to come up with questions or a synopsis of what they want to talk about during the meeting. So they'll help board members come prepared. During the meeting, you could assign certain tasks. You could formulate the committees. You could even use digital signatures for approval processes throughout the board meeting. So they are very, very helpful, not only keeping the board organized, but also keeping value in everybody's time to make sure you get through everything on the agenda. Stick to the agenda during the meeting. Give an agenda item a set time frame on the agenda, consistently showing board and committee members that their time is valued. So I'm sure everybody's been in meetings where there might be 5 things on the agenda and the meeting might be an hour and you're on the first one and you're 45 minutes into the meeting. So again, you want to try to set certain time limits or table items to the next meeting. I know not everybody likes to do that, especially some items are just as important as others, and you want to get through everything within an agenda in a certain time frame. So stick to the agenda, and that board portal could assist with that. Create the rules of engagement for meetings, such as sharing meetings, norms and expectations. So cell phone use, you're going to want to avoid being on the cell phone. You want people engaged during your meetings. If it's a virtual meeting, which most are nowadays, possibly turn your screen on so everybody can see you, to avoid any distractions. So it's important to set these boundaries and these rules for the meetings. Complete post-meeting tasks. Portal could definitely help out with that, as far as assigning certain tasks to board members, having them complete the tasks and reporting based on the portal. Board meetings can't be effective if there is no follow-up. So again, find answers and supporting material for any questions that may have arisen during the meeting, and make sure any unresolved items are placed on the next meeting agenda. So again, you want to complete those post-meeting tasks, and you want to, and if you have a portal or looking into a portal, this could assist you with that. Keep good minutes and document decisions. So again, this is a no-brainer. Board minutes should be complete, accurate, and concise. This is, the framework of a good board. You want to keep those minutes in order. You want to be able to refer back to the minutes for information that was said in previous meetings. And again, these minutes can be kept on a portal or within a separate link. But again, detailed, thorough minutes are always important. And obviously, you want to document any major decision made. You don't want later somebody come back and say, when was that, decision made? When did we decide to do this? You could go back to that particular board meeting and, take a look at that. So rebuilding your current board. If your board is having some issues or you're thinking about, possibly, reassessing it, these are some tips that you could follow and some questions you should be asking yourself if you're a board chair or on a board, or even management, the CEO of the board. These are some of the questions you need to be asking the board. Does the board have too few or too many, or right around the right number of members? The right board size depends on many factors, including your organization size and complexity of your organization. From the poll that was sent earlier, most boards were about 6 to 10. There was some close to 20. So this would depend based on the size of your organization. Is there, 50 programs that the organization runs? Are there multiple revenue streams? Or what's the reason that you would have 20 members on a board? Or what's the reason you would only have 6 or 7 members on a board? So this type of information should be looked at to decide, what's the, sweet spot, how many members would be most effective. You want to make up and represent a range of diversity and inclusion. Diversity can cover a lot of different things. I'll give you an example. I was one of our clients. It was a school for kids with disability issues, and one of the board members was a parent of the student, and they gave a really good perspective on what the parents are looking for within a board. So you got to make sure that you have all different diverse people within your board, whether it's a finance person, a program person, an attorney that we talked about before, and also the parent of somebody receiving services from the organization. So this perspective is important and provides for good ideas for improvement for the organization, for the board. How does each member align with the mission statement? Why are you on this board? Are you on this board because you really want to be on the board? Are you on this board just so you're on a board and you could, say you're on a board? Are you invested? Are you passionate? So these are items that you're going to want to, look at and identify who belongs on the board. Maybe, might not be a good fit, or maybe it is really good. So you want to, evaluate each board member on, how they align with the organization. And how does each member contribute? Obviously there's that 80-20 rule where 80% of the people do most or 20% of the people do most of the work. I know everybody heard that, but I think it's important to evaluate board members and their contribution to the board. So I think that's important to take a look at when you're assessing it. Rebuilding your current board. So after you, ID your needs and it's time to find, a good candidate, you want to find a qualified candidate. So identifying board members that bring at least one of the 3 W's. So this is something that I heard a long time ago and, really stuck with me. So when looking at board members, you want the 3 W's: wealth, work, and wisdom. Wealth, obviously looking for somebody that's generous, somebody who, comes with their checkbook. Those are always good board members to have. Work, you want somebody who's going to invest their time and effort, attend the meetings, organize fundraisers. They're focused on the mission of the organization. And then wisdom, you want somebody with experience and ideas, somebody who wants to bring the organization to the next level. So I always liked that acronym, and I always thought it was very helpful and very true in many ways. You could ask current board members for help. You could meet with your donors with a board-aware mindset. Educate them on what the organization is doing. Make it hard for them to say no to donating money or providing their time. There's a lot of other items. You can invite community leaders to events. When making public appearances, you can mention that you're looking for people interested in becoming active volunteers or board members. You could advertise in local newspapers. You can consider any current volunteers who are qualified to serve on the board. So there's a wide array of things you could do to identify those board members who would be the best for your organization. Crisis management. Not sure if we're going to be able to get through all the slides, but crisis management is very important. People do, board members and people don't always think about what crisis management is, whether it's a cybersecurity threat, a natural disaster, finance, and cybersecurity has been very active. You see it in the news. You see a lot of ransomware attacks and organizations being hacked into. And for most nonprofit organization or any organization, the organization has all types of information, whether it's donor information, names, addresses, social security numbers, employee info. So you want to make sure that you have a plan for that. You work with your IT company to make sure that you have the adequate security. And obviously you want to make sure you have the proper cybersecurity insurance, because this is becoming more common than not in today's world. So it's very important to, get a grip on your cybersecurity. You want to anticipate and organize and prepare for any type of issues regarding that. You have your natural disasters. In Buffalo, we have, a lot of snowstorms that kind of lock down travel for particular periods of time. So you're going to want to have a policy for that. Financial recessions, the market's down. You might have a donor who donates, $50,000 to the organization every single year, and then in the most recent year, you see donated $5,000. You're going to want to, talk to that donor, say, what's going on. Maybe, his company isn't doing as well as it has in the past. Maybe the market's down and he took a, substantial hit on some of his investments. Maybe it's an overall recession, inflation, things like that. And then obviously reputational issue, and the most valuable asset of an organization is its reputation. It's not the money in the bank or the investments. It's having a good reputation. So again, with crisis management, some of the best practices are you want to anticipate and organize and prepare to address these when these arise. You want to protect your organization financially. You want to stay up to date on budgets, variance analysis. You want to make sure that everything is acting the way it's projected. If it's not, these are the questions you have to ask management and the CFO. You want to support your people, ensure you have people that have the tools necessary to complete their work. You want to facilitate open communications. You want to communicate quickly and effectively. One thing in an organization, if you don't do this, you'll create a vacuum and someone else will fill with their own narrative. So you want to be open with your employees and employees of the organization, whether you're board or management. You want to make sure that you're giving them accurate information and the best information and most up to date. You should always reassess your risk profile, learn from the past, and you have to be adaptive. Okay, we have a couple minutes left.
One question just came in from Anne. It doesn't quite count as a crisis, but what are your recommendations for how board should handle lobbying and/or advocacy requests?
No, that's a good question. And a lot of nonprofits have, consult with a lobbyist organization. And obviously that is handled, very, focused on, and there's certain parts of the 990 where you have to require, where you have to disclose your lobbyist activity. And if you, put any funds to that organ, or if you paid any, any payments to that lobbyist organization, and it's very beneficial for some organizations. But how should a board handle it? It should get as much information as it possibly can about, the lobbyists and their information, and make the best decision possible, based on the information that they have. Also, talk to other nonprofit boards, see what they're doing and how they're handling it, and use their experience and feedback, involving that information. So, there's really no, perfect answer for that. But again, gather all the information you have, talk to other, talk with the board, talk with management, and, understand that that's a very important item, and it should be handled, properly.
Thanks, Ann. If you have any more questions, just throw them in there. Just so everybody knows, we have 2 slides left, so just hang on there. I know we're coming close to 1 o'clock, but there's only 2 left, so.
Yeah, great. And the last 2 slides have to do with fundraising responsibilities. And I know one of our poll questions talked about that. So just want to emphasize the importance of fundraising for a nonprofit. A lot of nonprofits, most nonprofits are funded through grants and contribution and program contracts. So a lot of their funding is, restricted or has to be used for a certain purpose. With donations, can be used to do things that the organization wants to do that maybe their grants or contributions might not allocate for. So again, fundraising, getting out there and trying to get, people to donate to the organization, getting your name out there is very important. You can start off by making a personal annual gift if you're on the board. Understand your organization fundraising programs and strategies. You want to make sure you help or you thank these donors who donate to you. Somebody donate, $5,000, $10,000 and they don't get a thank you. That's something that's very important. People really pay attention to that. And you want to help cultivate the donors. You want to tell them what you're doing and how important it is to the community, how it's important to you. And, a lot of times people do react to that and they do understand that, and that will, lead to, other fundraising, events and other fundraising items. So you want to motivate the board members to fundraise, set expectations. You want to train your board members to fundraise. You want to explain to them why it's so important to your organization. Possibly setting an individual work plan for each board member might be helpful. You want to show support, and you want to share progress consistently, and you want to make it fun. Obviously, certain events, whether they're dinners or galas or events like that, make it fun for, people to come, whether it's employees or outside donors. You want to make it as fun as possible to get the word out.
We do have another question that came in from Shay. How much do you want to expose new board members of past issues, whistleblowing? How much dirty laundry do you want to air?
Yeah. So any good organization should have a media policy. Like, so if something does happen, whether it's a reputational issue or somebody in the organization gets a DUI or something to that, you should have somebody ready to go to address the media. That's always very important. And I think it's very important to be transparent. And I think it's very important to, when getting on a board, for that new board member to know everything about the organization. And nowadays it's pretty hard to hide certain things, obviously with the internet and word of mouth. But I would, you're not going to make anything better by not being truthful and not, coming, full circle with certain things. That's how you improve. And typically organizations that do have, these type of issues, they need more help from the board than anybody else. So the board plays a big role in that. And I think that they should be well aware of everything that happened in the past.
Great, thank you. And our final slide, we'll be wrapping everything up for everybody.
Great. No, I think I touched on a lot of this earlier.
Okay.
So.
All right, so if anybody has any final questions, you can submit them now. I am going to launch one more poll while everybody's filling that out. If you have any questions, put that in there. Anthony gave some great examples. Clearly, this is a passion of yours, and you're deep in it, so we appreciate all your expertise, suggestions, and ideas today. We're going to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I will, like I said before, send you an email this afternoon with a copy of the slides and the recorded session. You will receive a survey immediately after this. If you could fill that out also and let us know how things were today. Feel free to reach out to us anytime or reach out to Anthony directly if you'd like to set up a call or meeting with him. We're happy to help. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.